I call upon the spirit of the owl, messenger of wisdom. Welcome to the Temple of the Owl. Merry meet, seekers of knowledge, for I am your host, Matt's Owl. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day out there, sending some positivity and some good vibes your way. Here at the Temple of the Owl, located deep in the forests of Northern California. In this episode, we will discuss shapeshifters and why it's important to witches. This is where we talk about magic and spirituality on all levels, but it's through the perspective of a modern witch. Now, as always, these are just ideas to help you live a magical life and think about things differently. Take the information and do what you want. Thank you guys for listening on the Spotify and the YouTubes. We're doing good on that. Special thank you for listening on the KUAP Digital Broadcasting. That's the Troubled Minds Radio Network. Thank you guys. And I want to thank everyone over there just for having a good time and helping me out with the show. So I want to start the show with what I call the MOD, or the message of the day. It's a quote I find that helps me explain the show topic. And today's quote is from the Spiral Dance from Starhawk. And today's quote is, "To shapeshift is to shift consciousness." And I like that because it tells us that both physical and mental versions of shapeshifting. Now, what is a shapeshifter? At its core, a shapeshifter is a being that can change form, usually between human and animal, but sometimes into spirits, monsters, or even other humans. The transformation can be physical, spiritual, illusionary, or symbolic, depending on the culture. Now, shapeshifting shows up everywhere, and that's what tells you that it's touching something very old in the human psyche. Shapeshifters are everywhere, so let's look at it in a worldview. We have werewolves. Now, werewolves are the most famous, found across Celtic, German, Slavic, and Nordic cultures. Transformation often tied to the full moon, and curses, and wearing animal skins or belts. Even has pacts with dark forces. Now, early versions weren't always evil. Some were warriors, protectors, or outcasts. In Norse myth, we have berserkers. They were said to wear bear or wolf skins and become the animal in battle. Odin himself actually practiced hammer. It's spelled Hamr, a form of soul shifting. Up next, you can go to the East Asian shapeshifters, the Kitsune in Japan, and the Hiljing in China. They're fox spirits that gain tails and power with age, and they can become beautiful humans. But they're often tricksters, seducers, or even teachers. And they're morally complex. They're not evil or good. They're clever. Now, these stories warn about deception, desire, and illusion. In the indigenous and the Mesoamerican beliefs, we have the Nagul. It's a human with an animal spirit, or a double. Sometimes a witch, sometimes a shaman. The shapeshifting here is spiritual. It's not just physical. The animal form reflects the person's soul. Among many Native American traditions, shapeshifting is associated with medicine. It's taboo to speak casually, and some cultures often framed it as soul travel rather than a bodily change. We also have in African and Caribbean traditions, the leopard man, the hyena man, and the crocodile spirits. Now, these transformations are tied to secret societies, ancestral magic, or protection. In voodoo lore, shapeshifting may involve spiritual possession, astral projection, and glamour or illusion spells. Across cultures, shapeshifting usually happens through animal skins or talismans, a ritual, initiation, or a spiritual possession, or like a soul flight or trance. It also is tied to cursings and blessings. bloodlines. And notice the pattern. The body changes when the soul or identity changes. Now, shapeshifters symbolize liminality, existing between the worlds. Their dual nature, like civilized versus the wild. You have your hidden self, a mask, a secret in the shadows. And that's power through adaptability or fear of the other. They often appear in cultures during times of social upheaval, religious transitions, and witchcraft, and through the occult. In their shape-shifting often means psychic transformation, like assuming an archetype and entering an animal consciousness, masking one's energy, not literal fur and claws, but a real shift in perception and power. Now, shapeshifters and witches. Historically, accusations of shapeshifting were common during the witch trials. Witches were said to become cats, hares, wolves, and owls. And that wasn't random. These animals were more like symbols of the night, independence, death, sexuality, and magical confessions. They often describe dreamlike transformations, suggesting that trance starts in a visionary experience. Now, in modern shapeshifters, today we see them as like superhero horror icons and trauma metaphors, like queer and trans symbolism, changing form to choose an identity, and survival strategies like masking. The shapeshifter endures because we still live multiple selves. In Egyptian mythology, the gods didn't just disguise themselves. They were fluid by nature. Their form was their power. And changing shape is on the authority over reality itself. Let's walk through in the Egyptian cultures. The ancient Egyptians believed identity had multiple layers. They had the Ka, the life force, and the Ba, the personality, and the mobility of the soul. The Ankh is a transfigured spirit. Let's see. So what else we have? Transformation isn't a magic trick. It's cosmic psychics. Oh, physics. It's cosmic physics. To change form is to command. We have Ra, the master of forms. Ra takes many shapes. Most of the time he's a falcon. Sometimes he's a ram or a scarab. You have Khepri, an old man at dusk and a serpent at night. During the underworld journey, Ra literally ages, dies, and is reborn every 24 hours. That's a shapeshifting on a cosmic scale. Now, Ra nightly transformation in the Duat is one of the oldest death rebirth shapeshifts myths that we have. We also have Anubis. He's known for being a jackal jackal-headed man, and fully human in rare texts, but he stands between life and death, decay and preservation. Jackals were scavengers of tombs, and Anubis becomes a threat in order to control it. That's a classic shapeshifter move. We also have Bastet and Sekhmet, one soul but two forms. These are the same goddesses in different states. Sekhmet is the lioness, the plague, war, and solar rage. And Bastet is the cat, protection, and pleasure. When Sekhmet nearly destroys humanity, the gods trick her into changing form, cooling her rage into Bastet. This shapeshifting is an emotional alchemy. We also have Sobek. Now Sobek shifts between crocodile, he's a crocodile-headed man, but he's also a divine warrior. Now crocodiles are terrifying, but they're also sacred. Sobek embodies raw violence without letting it run wild. The pharaohs aligned Sobek to claim predatory power without becoming tyrants. Up next we have Horus and Seth. transformation through conflict. Horus was a falcon man, and Seth was a beast. Like he was a boar, sometimes he was a serpent, and sometimes he was a hippo. Their battle includes shape changes in animal combat, sexual and bodily transformations. This isn't just a fight, it's identity warfare. Whoever controls the form controls the kingship. We have Isis. Now, Isis doesn't brute force transformation. She outsmarts reality. She creates a serpent from Ra's spit, and forces him to reveal his true name, and gains power over his later texts. Isis disguises herself as a mortal woman and moves between the divine and human roles freely. Her shapeshifting is intellectual, magical, and linguistic. The priests and the magicians of the dead, in the funerary texts like the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead, the deceased declares, "I am a falcon, I am a lotus, I am a serpent. I am a god who become anything into being himself." These aren't metaphors, they're spells of becoming. The dead shapeshift to move freely, to avoid destruction, and gain divine power, to travel the duat. The animal masks and ritual transformations of the priests, they wore the jackal masks for Anubis, falcon masks for Horus, and cow horns for Hathor. The mask wasn't symbolic, it invoked the possession. You didn't pretend to be a god, you hosted it. In Egyptian myth, shapeshifters symbolize authority over death, mastery of identity, and fluid divinity, and survival through adaptability. The soul's ability to move, unlike the European werewolves, which is curse-based. The Egyptian shapeshifting is intentional, and it's sacred. It's often written into a spell. The most dangerous beings in Egyptian myth are those that are stuck in one form, like Apep. He's the chaos serpent. The damned, who cannot transform in the afterlife. To be able to shapeshift is to be or if you can't shapeshift, you are cosmically trapped. The shapeshifters weren't just monsters. The reason why witches and the stories never stay the same, they become animals. They become younger. They become monsters. They become us. Of course, we're talking about shapeshifting in witch culture. Before the witches were Halloween costumes and TV characters, they were accusations. In early modern Europe, people generally believed that witches could turn into cats and wolves and birds and walk unseen through villages, slip between human and animal skin. These aren't fairy tales. They were courtroom testimony. Shapeshifting was terrifying because it meant you couldn't tell who was human anymore. Your neighbor, your wife. Pop culture inherits this fear wholesale, and it puts better lighting on it. One of the most faithful modern depictions of this fear appears when in The Witch from 2015, when witches don't announce themselves. They move as goats, crows, wolves, and the final transformation, it isn't played as horror, it's played as a release. Shapeshifting here means leaving God, leaving society, and leaving the rules of womanhood. The witch doesn't become less human, she becomes free. And that terrifies the audience far more than the claws ever could. Now, not all shapeshifting witches turn into animals. Some change age. Some change beauty. Some change how they're seen. Like, think of the evil queen in Snow White. She transforms from an old woman into an old woman to move unseen. Now, this reflects a deep historical belief that witches could wear faces. In pop culture, it becomes youth magic, body swapping, or glamour spells and identity theft. Shows like American Horror Story Coven push the idea where shapeshifting isn't about survival, it's about desperation. The fear isn't the witch. The fear is becoming her. One thing pop culture keeps returning to is this idea that shape-shifting witches don't just change shape, they change meaning. In movies like Ginger Snaps or The Company of Wolves, transformation is tied to puberty, sexuality, blood, hunger, and rage. This is where witchcraft and werewolf myths bleed together. But there's a difference. Werewolves transform because they're cursed. Witches transform because they learned how. That distinction matters. It's why shape-shifting witches are almost always women and almost always punished for wanting control over their bodies. Modern pop culture often drops literal transformation and keeps the effect. In Practical Magic, the movie, no one grows claws, but the rooms can change when the witches enter. In the movie The Love Witch, men don't practice or they don't notice the spell working until they're no longer themselves. This is shapeshifting as psychological magic. The witch doesn't change shape, she changes the world around her. Historically speaking, witches are much closer to how people actually believed how witchcraft worked. So, why does pop culture keep returning to shape-shifting witches? Is it because shapeshifting represents hidden selves, masking, and code switching? It's about survival, and it can't be spoken aloud because shapeshifting witches live in worlds that don't let them be whole. And every time society tightens control over bodies, over gender, or over identity, these stories come roaring back. It's a different decade, but the same fear. Another thing I want to talk about was in a 2018 interview on Howard Stern, Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan described an intense personal experience from years earlier. He claimed that he was with someone, and we assume it is to be a romantic partner. Now, during an emotional moment, the person's face appeared to change into something non-human. He described it as witnessing someone shapeshift. He said the experience deeply disturbed him, and he later clarified that he did not want to name the person involved and became uncomfortable discussing it further. He never provided any physical evidence, and no one else present publicly corroborated the event. What's fascinating is not whether it happened. What's fascinating that in 2018, in a modern studio, a rock star used a word that's thousands of years old, shapeshifter, and millions of people instantly understood the fear. That tells you something about how alive the archetype still is. Another modern tale of shapeshifting I want to talk about was, if you guys remember that one about the girl on the plane. I don't remember what happened a few years back now, but there was a girl on a plane, and she was freaking out on the plane, and she was saying that someone was next to her on the seat on the plane was shapeshifting into other things, and she was freaking out on the plane. She says that's not really a person, and I think they escorted her off the plane. I'm not sure if they canceled the flight or what happened, but I remember they escorted her off the plane, and then I noticed something weird with that story is that it never really got followed up on. No one went back and tried to find her and interview her and see what she saw. But then all of her accounts were frozen and she was wiped off the internet. I wonder what's going on there. Something must have happened there. And it reminds me of what we're talking about tonight, shapeshifters. Is it real? Is it something that can really happen? And we have people having accounts of this, like Billy Corgan, and people having these phenomenon that they see. What's going on there? But in pop culture, shape-shifting witches aren't dangerous because they change form. They're dangerous because they remind us that identity isn't fixed, that the self is flexible, and that power can be learned. And it's that the skin you're given isn't the only one you can wear, and that the idea has always been more frightening than any monster. Shapeshifters were not just monsters. They're warnings and teachings. If you deny your animal nature, it will haunt you. If you embrace it without wisdom, it will consume you. So balance is the lesson. Until next time, watch the shadows. Well, thank you guys for listening to that. With shapeshifting, I believe it's more in your head that you can do it, transforming into other things, and even like in the shamanic rituals where they transform. I believe more in that than actual physically transforming. I'm not saying it's not real. It's just that I've never had an experience like that. So whether we're talking about shapeshifters or skinwalkers or anything like that, the phenomena's out there. So let's pay attention. Let's listen to the stories and hear what's going on and decide for yourself what you think is real, as always. But something's going on here with this shape-shifting. So I thought it was interesting and I wanted to do a show on it. So thank you guys for listening. A special thank you for those listening on KUAP Digital Broadcasting. That's the Troubled Minds Radio Network. Go to troubledminds.org. And I want to thank you guys for listening on there. Thank you guys for listening on the Temple of the Owl. I release the spirit of the owl. Have a good night. Blessed be.
For many centuries, witchcraft has been considered evil, associated with the devil and all things dark. Let's break these stereotypes with your host, Matt Sow, of the Temple of the Owl. Let's talk about magic, of the old ways to explore the many roles of the witch, learn the tools of the craft, the history of the science behind this ancient, earth-based religion on the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. As antagonist, monster.